Greetings, and welcome to When the Moment Chooses You. I am your host, Coach Charlene, and I am extremely excited today that I have Dr. Tamu Green with me. So, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. It is really a pleasure to be here.
Yes, I am extremely excited and honored to be honest. So, I'd like to start out with just talking about a little bit of context of why I started the podcast. But for me in 2020, we went through, well, everybody went through a very challenging time. And for me, I found my voice during that time because I was a Black leader. And it was just like I was always only me, but I never spoke up. I saw things that weren't right and I didn't speak up. I did not have the courage. But when the murder of George Floyd happened, there's something that went off on the inside of me, and I could no longer stay silent. I wanted to be part of the change. And so that's why I started When the Moment Chooses You. I didn't start it then. It took me about 2 years
Mhm.
for the baby to come into fruition. And so that was my passion, to begin to start sharing stories that would help transform lives. And that's really what I started doing in my organization and other places that I was invited to speak. So I believe that there's moments that call us into them so that we can disrupt, we can transform, we can do whatever it is that we are called to do in that moment. And so that's kind of what the podcast is about. So, Dr. Green, I would love to know. I know you probably have had several moments, but do you mind? I'm going to read your bio
Sure.
first, and then I would love to jump into a moment that you have experienced
Sure.
that you have been a change agent for.
Sure.
So let me read your bio first. So Dr. Tamu Green brings expertise and lived experience in communities facing inequities in her pursuit of social justice through institutional and systems change. She is the CEO of the Equity and Wellness Institute, which has guided numerous organizations and institutions in their aspirations of advancing equitable internal and external practices. Dr. Green's passion for engaging the public in solutions that benefit us all have landed her in Time Magazine, several podcasts, and the TEDx Folsom stage. Her efforts have been aided by her networks, including Robert Wood Johnson Foundation and American Leadership Forum, of which she is a senior fellow. And that is a very small snippet of what this amazing queen is doing. So I'll let you tell us a little bit more about yourself. And then if you could just glide into perhaps a moment that you would like to share with us.
Thank you so very much. Well, let's see, to tell you a little bit about myself. Well, I'll say that I am a multiracial, multi religious woman living in California. And I think that that has very much shaped my experience and the work that I do in the world. I am a mother, I have two sons, and that also shapes the work that I do in the world because I'm trying to create a place where they and other young people can thrive. My background is in sociology and human development. So I really like looking at solutions to problems both at
Mm.
the macro level, coming at it from that sociology perspective, how it is that we behave in groups and in our societies, but also the micro level, human development, which is about developmental psychology, how we operate from our individual selves and what we bring to that through our biology and our environment. So that's a little bit about me.
That is wonderful. So tell me, Dr. Green, is there a moment or a few moments that you can share with us that you felt that call? Because I looked at your website and it talked about the Equity and Wellness Institute. So let me ask you this first. How long has that been around?
So that's a good question because I started my consulting firm 20 almost 28 years ago.
Wow.
Yeah, I was kind of a baby myself. I was 25 years old and I was pregnant with my first son. And I started my consulting firm as a way to have some flexibility and autonomy and independence over my financial affairs because I was going to be a mother. And my mother, who's a Black woman, had raised me and taught me that you should never be dependent on someone else for a paycheck. So when
Mm.
my sister and I were young, she taught us how to cornrow because she's like, you can always braid a head of hair and make some money. And so that was my entree into the consulting world was, starting this consulting firm as a young woman, as I said, to have some flexibility as a young mom. And over the years, I worked more or less with my consulting firm, depending on kind of what was going on in my life. And I rebranded the firm about 4 or 5 years ago to be the Equity and Wellness Institute. And about 2 years ago, decided that I was just going to work exclusively in the firm.
Wow, that is pretty amazing. At 24, you were able to do
Well,
that.
20, yeah, actually, I guess I was 24. I said 25, but it was actually
Yeah,
24.
20.
Yeah.
Yeah, but that's pretty amazing. So, where did the passion come from for equity? That's what I'm wondering.
Yes. And I was thinking about that as I was kind of getting my thoughts together for this conversation with you. And, this question of like, when does the moment choose you? Well, I mentioned to you my mother. My mother has been incredibly instrumental in my life. My mother was born and raised in Pine Bluff, Arkansas. And she kind of moved
Mm.
back and forth between Pine Bluff and Watts, California, um, as a young person. But she spent a lot of time in Pine Bluff, Arkansas, with her grandmother and in the civil rights movement. So,
Uh,
she talks about spending as much time outside of school as inside of school when she was a high school student because she was so involved in the civil rights movement. And so I was raised with that consciousness from her that it is not a choice, to fight for our freedom. It is just what we do. And so
yes.
I was thinking about when I was an elementary school student, and we lived in Irvine, California, in Southern California. And when Martin Luther King's birthday would roll around, she would pull us out of school. And we were not a rich family by any stretch of the imagination
Mm.
whatsoever, right? We're living in an apartment and all of that. But she
Right.
would pull us out of school and she would take us on vacation. We would all cram up in our little car and go to Santa Barbara and stay in a hotel. And like we would celebrate that it was his birthday. And we
Wow.
also would protest in the streets. Like I remember being a child and protesting to advocate for his birthday to be a national holiday, right? And so I feel like in a lot of ways that was like my entree into understanding that you lean into what your values are.
Yes.
And you may get there before other people get there. The way that she was pulling us out of school. I actually wound up doing the same thing with my kid. I can't believe it. He went to a private school. He's 17 years old now, but when he was in kindergarten, first grade, second grade, his private school did not have MLK Day off. And I was like, well, number one, we're going to pull you out of school because we're going to celebrate the holiday together. But I'm also going to get really involved in your school politics and we're going to make some changes, which,
Wow.
happened.
Yeah, no, that's pretty awesome. But it sounds like though, from really young, you were doing things like you talked about cornrowing. She was teaching you entrepreneurship then.
Yes.
So that's pretty amazing of how that came out. And so you were set up to just launch and doing your own business. So that's really great because the typical American usually just grabs a job, and just does that. And you get so consumed that you can't really do the work that your heart may be even speaking to you to do. So thank you so much for sharing that. I'm curious, when you started the business, tell me a little bit about that. Was that challenging for you at 24?
um, you know what? I think that I was just excited by the possibility of being
Mm.
able to have that autonomy and that flexibility and to do interesting projects. The very first project that I did was for a women's health leadership program, and they had essentially had a couple of cohorts or a few cohorts come through their program, and they wanted to know their effectiveness. And so they sent me around the state to interview all of these women. So I went to Indian reservations, and I went, to rural areas on the coast that
Wow.
took me many hours to drive to. And I went to the heart of South Central LA onto Skid Row. I went to all of these places and met with these phenomenal women who were doing this incredible work in their communities. And then I got to write up their stories, right? And
Mm.
so that was, as I said, my entree into being a consultant and having my consulting firm. And it's funny because I was actually just telling this story an hour or two ago with a young person who had been an intern of mine some years ago, and we went out to lunch together, and she was asking me about, the journey of becoming a consultant, and how do you do it, and when do you do it, and kind of what are the challenges associated and whatnot. So at the time, I was in a good position because I was married and my husband had a regular job. Um, it hardly paid anything at all. We were
Yeah.
really, really broke. We were young. We had this baby, but it allowed me to have that bit of flexibility. That it wasn't like just me trying to provide for myself through my consulting firm. But I think that the challenges that do come along with starting a business on your own really do have to do with your risk tolerance. So, do you break out in hives at the thought of having to provide your own health insurance and retirement, and knowing that it's feast or famine and that you have clients that aren't going to pay you when they're supposed to, and you're going to have to live off your credit cards for a while, that there are all of those things that you have to do when you kind of strike out on your own and decide that you're going to work for yourself.
So you have to be a risk taker and a water walker and all of that, and then some.
You really, really do. But there are a lot of things that you can do to set yourself up for success as much as possible. So like one of the things that I think about being called to was my doctoral program. That I realized that I needed to know more in order to be more effective in the work
Mm,
that I was doing at the time. And so, I went to grad school, and I think that that's one of the things that has helped me to be more successful in the business environment. So, there are things that you can do where you're taking
right.
some of the risk out of it.
So, Dr. Green, over the last 25 plus years, my question to you is, how are things with us now when in the health, in the equity space?
Hmm.
Yeah.
Well, so I've seen a lot of changes in this space over the last 25 plus years. And what I feel really heartened by is that we used to only be able to talk about change at the individual level, which is important because we do need to understand what's going on with ourselves, what our own implicit biases are, our communication styles, um, all of that, our own grit, determination, resilience. Those are really important things to know and understand, but they're not by any stretch of the imagination the whole picture. And so now we're actually able to talk about the institutions and the systems and the structures and how those come into play in terms of shaping the likelihood of our full potential being manifested.
Mm,
So that's where I really like to spend a lot of my time and energy and efforts is in that space, because a lot of people are very daunted by it. They're a little bit like deer in headlights. They don't know how to get started because it seems so overwhelming. And so I really like to work in that space to help us demystify, um, how our policies play out, how our practices play out, and the kinds of things that we can do to move towards a more equitable society.
Oh, you
So
know what?
that's exciting.
Yeah, that's super exciting because I even think about in 2020 when the murder of George Floyd happened. I was on vacation at the time, and so my one of my leaders they text me, and they were like, "Oh my God, I don't even know what to say. This is so hard."
Yeah.
And so you help organization kind of strategize and tell me a little bit about what you do to help an organization to find their voice and do what they're supposed to do during times like that.
Yeah. So organizations are beginning to recognize that they have some culpability, right? That there is no organization or institution that is untouched by our historical trauma and the way in which that manifests in our current day operations. So, what I do is I help organizations take a look at their internal practices and what that means for um, their workforce, the diversity of their workforce, where people are working within their workforce. Like, do all your people of color work on the front line and you don't have any, in leadership positions? What the safety and inclusivity that people feel within the workforce, how folks are able to show up and whether they're going to continue to show up or whether you're experiencing a lot of attrition. So, looking at these internal dynamics and how that impacts who you are as an organization, but also externally, who are you there to serve? So, my clients actually are government institutions, they're nonprofit organizations, they're school districts and universities. And so they are there to serve communities. And how are they showing up to do that? And is there a way that they can do that better? And so there are lots of things that you can do, essentially to understand that relationship with those that you're there to serve and to improve that relationship. And one of the things that we really specialize in and love doing is community based participatory research.
Hmm.
So that means that we will work with community based organizations to train them up in what community based participatory research is. We'll pay them to be a part of this because we're not trying to like just have them do this out of the goodness of their hearts,
Right.
right? And then they will conduct focus groups and interviews and forums and surveys, and all of that will be culturally and linguistically appropriate because they know their communities, right? And so they're gathering the data from their communities, and then we're working with them on how to report on and present that data so that it can get incorporated back into the institution. Maybe it's the local county public health department or something, right? So that data gets incorporated back in to the planning process for that institution so that they have a real insight into what their community is thinking and feeling and wants and needs from them and expects from them, so that they can be better partners in whatever service they're delivering.
Wow, that's pretty powerful. So I'm just thinking along the lines. I work in maternal child, and so I love that you go to the community to find out what you need because you know how typically people are like strategizing and doing all of these plans and
Right.
they've never asked the end user what they need.
Right. Right.
So you guys actually do that. You facilitate that in these
Yes.
community groups. And like if I wanted to find out, I mean, so that we can help in our MCH because there's so much maternal mortality going on,
Yeah.
unfortunately. But a focus group on like pregnant moms to
Yeah.
help them, you would do things like that.
Yes. Yeah, no,
Wow.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
So,
that's
and that is the work that we've been doing, yes, for
well,
years.
that's really awesome. I'm so glad that you're on the show. So, I mean, to help us because I'm like, wow, that's amazing because that's really what we want to know. We want to know from their perspective,
Right.
what do they really need? Like, I mean, we use these words in hospitals, but what do they really need? So,
Right.
man, I knew you were like a total trailblazer, change agent, and all of that good stuff. So, I wanted to ask you a little bit more about you, though, because for you to be able to do all of the things that you're doing, it takes something. I feel like it takes someone that's has these special attributes. So where's your motivation coming from, Dr. Green? Like, where do you get your motivation from and to keep on pushing? Because you've been doing this work for so long and you're just as passionate as you were back then. So what is it within you that keeps your driving force? I guess that's what I'm trying to find
Mm.
out.
I don't know that it's any one thing. I mentioned some of them. I mentioned being a mom,
Yes.
and that is a driving force for me. So, last year at this time, I was on a TED stage, which was uh, probably one of the hardest things I've ever done in my life, right? But I was there to talk about a policy with global implications to save 1 billion lives
Oh, wow.
over, the course of the next century, around tobacco control. So,
Mm,
how can we phase out nicotine addiction,
yes.
essentially, with a very, very simple policy, which I'm really happy to say that King George III just talked about a few months ago that he is looking to implement in the UK. So, we could be getting some traction, which is nice.
Yay.
But,
That's good.
like, where does that come from? I still have two sons, and they're 17 and 27. The 27-year-old can legally go into any store if he so chooses and purchase nicotine products. The 17-year-old cannot because of the laws that we have. But when he's 21 here in the state of California, he could. And so, wouldn't it be wonderful if this policy were to be put in place? It's a birthday policy where, anyone born after a certain date is never going to be sold nicotine products. Like, I still have the potential to be able to protect him
Yes.
with this policy, right? As well
That's
as
wonderful.
1 billion other people. So some of my motivation for the work that I do and that I push on, I think, is maternally motivated.
Yeah, no, I think
Um,
that's wonderful
but a
because
lot
it's
of,
almost like you
yeah,
become a mother of all because of your
yes,
impact.
yes. I like, and so you have that mindset of what's the best thing for my child, may also be the best thing for a lot of other children. And so what is it that's within my power to be able to push for? What is my, sphere of influence that I can utilize in order to push for something? Other people will be working on other things that I don't work on that are going to
Yes.
help my children and other, in the younger generation. But it's like, where is it that I have my skills and my expertise to be able to bring to bear? So, it comes from that instinct. But again, it also just comes from this deep seated belief in justice
Yes.
that I
Yes.
just feel like that is our birthright, to have justice and freedom and to be able to live up to our full potential, which is what equity is. And so I think that that really pushes me because everywhere that I look, I'm able to see examples of where it isn't there. Everywhere that I look, I'm able to see homelessness and unemployment and war and violence. And so, it's not like I have to do a lot of digging. I just have to get out of bed in the morning and open my eyes to
Yes.
have that motivation of, yes, there is still a lot of work to be done, and to know that it can happen, that it's not a futile exercise. When I think about what my life looks like compared to any of my ancestors, as I've talked about on my mom's side, Our people were enslaved.
Right.
Our people were forced to work and to build up this country. Um, on my dad's side is Jewish. And, the pogroms that have happened and the Holocaust that has happened, and, all of the ways that that side of my lineage also has been targeted and oppressed. And so when I look at the seat of privilege that I have now to be able to go on vacation and to buy a home and to, live my life, like I am my ancestors' wildest dreams,
Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
So how do I take advantage of the seat of privilege that I'm in?
Yeah, that is so wonderful. I love this conversation because this is so it's feeding my spirit so much, because to be able to see you do that kind of work, it's very inspiring for me, because it even pushes me to even do more, to be honest, because of what you're doing. So I'm really thankful that you're here. I'm wondering though, Dr. Green, what tell me about some barriers that you faced.
Ooh.
I know there's probably a few. Because like normally people that are watching, they're kind of like dreamers, kind of wanting to break through some barriers. So thought that would be helpful to see what kind of barriers you dealt with and how you handled them.
Hmm. Well, there are always barriers around people thinking that they know what's best for you. There are always barriers around people thinking that they know who you are, um, and what you're capable of. When I went to grad school, I was a young mom. Um, the day that I started my program, my first day of class was my son's birthday. He was turning 5 years old. And I was working because I had to work.
Right, right,
um, and, there were people on the admissions committee that didn't think that I should be admitted, that they didn't think that I could handle it. I quite honestly didn't have a lot of the prerequisites, you know, for grad school. And I didn't have a master's degree. I still don't have a master's degree. I went straight to a doctoral program.
wow,
Um, and right. And so people will um, discount you. And I think that that is one of the biggest challenges, is that that can get in your head, right?
mm, mm-hmm.
So I think that that is just human, behavior, is that people will have expectations of you that are not high enough and all of that. And it's also human behavior for us to begin to believe that.
Yes,
So we have to figure out how to recognize when that's happening, when someone is setting up an expectation for us that simply is not high enough, that doesn't meet with what our grandmama would think about us.
yes. Yeah, I love that. That's so great, because there's a lot of people that are so bent on other people's expectations, and so to be able to hear what someone else is saying about you and put your hand up saying, no, I'm not accepting that, is pretty
Right.
powerful.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
And I actually challenge myself to do it with other people. You
Mm,
may have some young person in your family or something who's out running the streets or doing whatever it is that they're doing, right? And to challenge yourself to say, you know what? I'm going to hold a vision for that person, for who it
yes.
is that they're going to grow into and become, even before they have it for themselves.
Oh, that's beautiful. I love that. That's wonderful. Boy, if we could do that more, that's great. So thank you for that wisdom. And so I know we're ready to end, but I love to end on your wisdom gems. I want to hear Dr. Green's three wisdom gems for us. And I'm going to leave it open so that you can tell us whatever you want us to tell us. Give us three wisdom gems from you.
Well, thank you so much for that. Um, Well, one of them really builds off of what we were just talking about. So I think one of them is for you to see yourself the way the person who loves you most in this world sees you.
Mm.
Is that your mom or your nana or your bestie or your own son or daughter or your spouse, your ride or die? Who is it that sees you for who you are and loves you so dearly, right? So,
Mm.
like, when you have an idea, you want to start a business, or you want to go back to school, or you want to start a family, or, whatever it is that you want to do, that you're being called to do, that I want you to see yourself through the eyes of this person who loves you so much,
Wow.
right?
Yeah.
So that's going to be all the love and all the encouragement and all the support. So that's number one. Number two, I would say when you get called to do any of those things, please reach out to your network. I mentioned how I went to grad school and I was working and I had this 5-year-old, and I reached out I actually wrote a letter. I wrote a letter to my closest friends and family, and I said, look, I'm doing this thing and it's going to take up all my time, and I actually need your help. So could everyone sign up for a day for my child?
Oh,
And so
wow.
it was
That's,
great.
that's
So every day
wonderful.
after school, he had a different grandmother each day. He had an auntie,
That is great.
It was fabulous because I didn't want him to like miss out or miss me, because I was going to be away.
Right.
So preoccupied with, taking my classes and my homework and all of that. So he didn't miss out at all. He got more benefit than he ever would have. So reach out to your network, make sure that they know that you need them. And the last thing that I would say is for you to prioritize the time that you need to do the thing. You've
Mm.
been called to write the book.
Wow.
Prioritize, like, give yourself that time. What do you need to do to carve out that time for you to be successful to do that thing, right? Like, do you need to make sure that you have every Saturday and you're at the coffee shop and whoever else is holding down, the homestead, or, whatever it is, but set yourself up for success by allowing yourself to actually have the time that you need.
Wow, that is powerful. I am definitely taking that number 3 because I do have a
Good,
couple books in here that I got to
good.
get out.
Yes.
So now I want you to take some time to tell about your business and what you offer, so that people can kind of tap into some of this anointing that's on you.
Oh, well, thank you so much. So, the business really is about helping institutions do right by the communities that they serve. And so, if you are a part of any kind of institution where you know that you could do right both by your workforce, by your employees, your team, and also by the folks, the communities that you're there to serve, we want to help you by doing assessments to look at what your practices are around diversity, equity, inclusion, belonging. We want to help put together a plan of action for you and walk you through that plan to help you with training and with coaching and with the community engagement, all of the things to help facilitate your success so that you can look back in a few years and be like, yeah, we did that thing and we're in a much better place, and our communities are in a much better place as a result. So
Oh, that is
that's who we're
beautiful. Okay,
about.
that's great. Well, I will definitely put your contact information down in the description so that people can reach out to you. And please reach out to her because she's doing the work that we all need. And I'm so thankful, Dr. Green, that you were on the program with us. And I want to just honor you and thank you for all the wonderful work that you're doing. Thank you for being a trailblazer. Thank you for paving the way for us. And I'm just so in deep gratitude for
Oh,
you and all the work that you do.
I so appreciate the opportunity. This conversation has just been a joy, and I look forward to the next one.
Thank you so much for joining When the Moment Chooses You. What a compassionate, courageous conversation right during Black History Month. Well, she is truly a trailblazer. So I am excited about unpacking and telling my takeaways from her segment. So join me on my new program, In the Moment Live, where I'll be streaming from YouTube. And please subscribe to my YouTube channel so you can get alerts and join me over there so we can engage in some more conversation. Thank you so much for listening to When the Moment Chooses You.